Okay, morning everyone. Happy Friday. Long weekend too. Everyone saw that message that we are not doing ground on Monday. We get a day off. Yay. And if you didn't schedule a flight or you didn't request a flight with your instructor outside or specifically for Monday, then you do not have to fly on Monday either. You get the whole day off. So let's do attendance, and then we have a little bit of 8am to go over. We'll do a little review, and then we'll take the quiz and we'll leave. Okay, Abby's here, Alex is here, other Alex is here, Alan, good, Charlie's here, Ethan, got you, they got you, Harper's here, James here, Jeffrey's here, Justin's here, Heather's next to him, Max is here, Mitch, not here, Mitch is not here, Molly's here, and Omar's here, Otto's, going once, going twice, Otto, no. Mon's here, Samuel is not here yet. Spencer is back in the corner, Tiffany's here, Victor's here. Okay. Okay. Okay, ADM, aeronautical decision making. This is a short bit of slides to talk about it, but it's a really important concept we understand, or we need to understand as pilots. They have a little graph here for general aviation accidents, and we just need to be aware of the risks that we're taking every time we fly, right? Obviously, it's fun to fly, it's mostly safe. Everyone always says, it's more risk to drive a car on the highway than it is to fly a plane in the air, which in most cases is true, but we want to mitigate as much of that risk as possible. And when we look at general aviation accidents, the most accidents are happening, let me move this. The most accidents are happening on takeoff and initial climb and on landing. Do you see that? And not a lot of time on the descent, not a lot of time on the climb or the taxi, but the takeoff and initial climb and the landing. That's when we are at our lowest airspeeds and we're closest to the ground. So recovering from an incident on takeoff or climb, or recovering from something happening while you're in the pattern coming into land, is very slim chance to be able to recover because we're so close to the ground. So we've already talked about this throughout the class a lot, just because we talked about how base to final is really dangerous. That turn, we have to be aware and stay coordinated. And on takeoff and climb, there's not a lot we can do other than, follow our checklist, but takeoff and initial climb with an engine failure, a lot of the time accidents are happening there, and that's why we run through our briefing, our emergency briefing before takeoff, right? So in the run-up, you should be going through an emergency briefing with your instructor every single flight so that everyone's on the same page of what our plan is if the engine were to stop while we're taking off. And as long as we have a plan in place before we take off, we're giving ourselves the best chance at being able to get back on the ground safely. What we're going to get into after all of this, because we've already talked about, what we can do to mitigate risk in the air. We're going to talk about all that you need to be doing to mitigate risk before you even get in the plane, which is the biggest takeaway from talking about aeronautical decision making. You need to be able to make a decision before you get in the plane that mitigates as much risk as possible. So there's going to be a couple more acronyms that we have to memorize, which is annoying, but all these acronyms are, trying to set up like a systematic approach for you to assess the risk of the flight that you're about to take and make a decision before you even get in the plane. So you're not flying into a situation that's already set up. poorly. So we'll talk about all this. First, we're talking about identifying hazards. There's the PAVE checklist. That's the PAVE, PAVE. They put it in there, but PAVE is for pilot, aircraft, environment. They take the V from environment for PAVE. And then E for external pressures. I don't think they continue this, so we'll just talk about this right here. This is like the start of all pre-flight planning when we're talking about identifying hazards, because it covers pretty much everything to do with the flight, and then we'll get into each checklist that you need to be doing for each of these. So like pilot, you need to be evaluating yourself with a checklist that we'll talk about, the I'm safe checklist. You need to be evaluating yourself. Each time you need to be evaluating the aircraft, like we talked about, aircraft airworthiness, making sure you have your documents, making sure you have your inspections. What's the inspections acronym that we talked about? Does anyone remember? Inspections, no, length looks. Aviates? Who's that? Who said that? Behind, okay, sorry, I can't see you behind Tiffany. Aviates is right. Aviates with, you're just like right in my eye, it's not your head. Yeah, aviates where the I is actually a 1 for the 100-hour. Aviates is our inspection checklist. We need to make sure our airplane is up on inspections. And then environment is going to be like your weather briefing. We'll get into that next week when we get into weather, but environment is flight planning itself, looking at terrain that you're flying over, looking at the weather outlook, looking at your route, fuel planning, all that. And external pressures on top of that is evaluating what are we doing for this flight and how am I being pressured outside of just flying the airplane. So a lot of the times we talk about external pressures are time pressures. When people always give the example of you get your private pilot's license and your friend asks you to fly them to the wedding that they're going to this weekend or whatever, some big event that they're going to, and you decide that you're going to take off to try to get there like the day of, the morning of, and your external pressure is them pressuring you like, oh, let's just go, like the weather will be fine once we get up there, like I really got to make it to this whatever event on time. And you have to be able to make the decision and say, no, it's not safe. I've done all the other hazards. Maybe the weather's bad. Maybe something's wrong in the aircraft that you have to be able to say no, basically, is what we're going to get at. So we'll keep going to each of these. The pilot, first part of the PAVE checklist, pilot. Underneath that, we're talking about the I'm safe checklist. So I'm safe is another acronym where we do illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, eating. This is just like a general overview for checking yourself every time you fly. A lot of it should be self-explanatory. I mean, obviously, if you have been drinking alcohol, you should not be flying. Do we know what the alcohol rules are in 9117? Do we know what our, what's our blood alcohol level that we're allowed to? Or it's 8, 8 bottle to throttle, and yeah.
Alcohol is anything under 0.0.
Yes, you have to be under 0.04 blood alcohol level. So okay, 8 hours after the consumption of alcohol. Obviously, while you're under the influence of alcohol, you cannot fly. Influence doesn't mean you're drunk, right? Influence is still, you woke up the next day and you're hungover, you're still under the influence of alcohol. You should not be flying. And then obviously drug use. Can't be flying with drug use. And then here for the blood alcohol level, if you get ramp checked by an FAA agent and you take a blood alcohol test and you are 0.04 or greater, you can lose your license. So 0.04 is the number that you have to remember as one of the limitations, and then 8 hours after any consumption of alcohol. 8 hours bottle to throttle is what they say. Okay. I think that's pretty self-explanatory though. Illness, it's hard with illness on obviously if you feel really sick, you should not be flying. You can't focus if you're feeling sick, you're not, you want to be at peak physical health to be able to fly. Medication gets weird too because if you're using medication to help you feel less sick to fly, you're also impeding your ability to fly the airplane, especially what is the worst medicine you could take when you're going to fly that seems like not that bad? Like maybe you have a cold and you take some medicine. NyQuil, right? Drowsy medicine. Like you cannot take anything that will make you drowsy. You might not think, oh, it's just some NyQuil. I'll take that, I'll feel better. I just have a cold, whatever. You've just taken medicine that purposely makes you drowsy. Not a good idea to fly. Also, doesn't mean that you should be taking non-drowsy medicine, the non-drowsy NyQuil or whatever it is, to try to fly. There's a list of acceptable medications that you can use. Okay. If you are ever questioning, can I take this before I fly? Is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? There's a list over the counter medicine reference or medication reference guide. This is from the FAA. You go through this list, figure out if what you're going to take is legal to fly on. So antihistamines, nasal steroid, decongestants, cough, blah, 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 blah. Anything you're going to take before you fly to fix any kind of symptoms that you have, check this list and make sure you are in the green. And if it says avoid, you cannot fly on it. Does that make sense? There's an actual list out there. So use the list, check yourself before you wreck yourself, basically. Okay, stress is hard to quantify. Stress is basically you got to be real with yourself on what is affecting you outside of work or training or whatever. You have to make this decision when we're training as student pilots, right? This isn't just your responsibility when you get your private pilot's license and you start flying other people as passengers. This is the list you need to be doing before you go up with your instructor as well. You can't learn if you're not within the limits of, mental and physical ability. So if you're stressed at home, something's affecting you and you got a lot going on, make the decision to cancel the flight, skip the flight, do whatever you need to do. This is going to be person to person, but be real with yourself on how much you can actually handle and what's productive, especially in training. If you're that stressed and you can't focus during the flight, that's a waste of your hours and your time. Like, don't push yourself just to show up and get it done. Do productive work towards your ratings. We already talked about alcohol. Obviously, alcohol is bad. Fatigue is also kind of up in the air, person to person. They want you to be properly rested. There's something that they'll talk about, I think, in the written, and then later on, they talk about acute fatigue versus chronic fatigue. Obviously, acute fatigue would be last night, your neighbors were having a party and you were up you couldn't sleep because they were up all night and they didn't get any sleep. Chronic fatigue is obviously over time. You continuously every night are getting like 2 to 3 hours of sleep, and that's going to degrade your mental ability over time. I think we all know that, it just is. So you have to be able to recognize that in yourself on, are you getting enough sleep? And again, is it worth flying and not being able to focus? Any flight you do, we just talked about takeoff is the most aviation accidents. Think of every flight when you start something, you have to be prepared for something to happen. You need to be on your top mental game when you're flying. If you're fatigued and you're not there, you're checked out, whatever, you're not any help to the CFI, you're wasting their time, you're wasting your time. And especially obviously when you are PIC, we all know what PIC means, pilot in command. When you are PIC and you got your private and now you're taking your family up and you're gonna take them around the coast and it's so cool, you can fly now and take passengers, it's so fun. Take this very seriously before you take any of your family or your friends up in the air once you have your private. Yes,
Do you have to order that or can you take your things?
yeah, you can rent, you can rent this thing, you can solo rent this thing, once you have your private pilot certificate. I don't know what the rate is now, I can tell you. But yeah, you let dispatch know once you pass your private pilot, you can rent the plane solo on whatever rate it is, you'll have to look up in there, but I did it with my family right after I got my private. Yeah, it's just a solo rental versus, it's not like the yellow bar where you're like a student solo, it's like a purple solo rental on the FSP. And then they charge you the same way for that. Oh, last one, eating and emotion. They put the E's together. Obviously, this is person to person too. Make sure you're eating. Again, for your mental health, you cannot focus if you're hungry. And emotion, if something is going on, again, back to stress and emotion, kind of the same thing. If something is going on, pull yourself out of the situation before you get into an actual, bad situation there. Okay. I'm pretty sure this is the I'm air checklist. I've never heard of it. Is this IMAIR? These are the I guess you could call it the I'm air checklist. It's not even in order down here, so you'd have to split it into, but I'm sure in the King School you've seen this. These are the what are these called? The what are these called? Hazardous, yeah, attitudes. There you go. Hazardous attitudes. Look at you guys. King School. I haven't looked at this in forever. Hazardous attitudes, and then the remedy for the antidote, not the remedy, for how you fix it. Know these, in general for maybe the written and just have in the back of your head, but these are pretty easy to identify. A lot of the times what's gonna happen, you're in the air is your CFI might recognize one of these in you and try to follow the antidote. Hopefully you could recognize these in yourself. If you are displaying some kind of hazardous attitude, but a lot of times we either get into invulnerability where it won't happen to me, get a little too cocky, a little too confident on nothing will happen, it's all fine. We're not taking that, risk management, risk assessment seriously. And then resignation happens to a degree a lot of the time if you're one of those people in the air that if something goes wrong, you kind of shut down. That's not a great attitude to have in the plane. You have to, if something goes wrong in the air, it's going wrong means like you messed up. You made a bad radio call, you didn't do your steep turn right, it was all off, whatever. People have, tendency to resign from the situation of what's the use, like I kind of give up, like I can't do this, I shouldn't be a pilot, whatever. You start spiraling very fast. It happens to like almost everyone a couple times in the beginning of training where you're just like you're over it. You're in the air and you're like, I can't do this, like I keep messing up. You have to be able to recognize that, and hopefully your instructor will recognize that too if you're feeling that way, because it's not helpful in the air, right? In the air you need to be moving on from this stuff pretty quickly and then come back to it when you're debriefing with your instructor, and then you can feel bad and kind of beat yourself up for it. But in the air you have to move past whatever just happened, even if you're feeling bad about it, even if it was embarrassing, whatever, if you made a call or you messed up your flight planning and took your instructor to the wrong airport, whatever, you need to be able to move on from that. Don't get into resignation where you just kind of give up. And there are people, like there are stories CFIs have where the student just literally takes their hands off the controls and says, I'm done, I can't do it. Like your controls, like I'm done. And there's not a lot you can do with that. Like, especially if we're gonna sign you off to solo and to solo cross country, you have to recognize this and not fall into that pit, because you're flying solo, you can't give up, right? You can't just say, oh, I'm done, like it's too much, I can't fly, this is not for me, whatever. We got to be able to move on, get ourselves out of that hole, and then when you get on the ground, you can talk to your instructor or whoever about what happened and move past it. But these are pretty, straightforward. Anti-authority, follow the rules. They're usually right. Impulsivity, not so fast, think first. Doing it quickly doesn't mean you're doing it right. And macho happens a lot too, mainly with, certain group of pilots, not really with the other group of pilots, but macho, you see a lot for. You start to get, again, a little cocky. You think maybe you've gotten into solo, now you feel like you can do it all. Maybe you want to take a chance and fly yourself over on your solo cross country over to Catalina, have a good look at the island, whatever, I can do it, no you can't. Yeah, what that's all I have to say about that. Internal resources. Okay. Okay, the person you're flying with is one of the most underutilized resource that you have. Even a passenger that has no flying experience. So when you're taking your friends up, you're taking your family up, and they have no idea what's going on. They're just there to sit there while you fly them around the coast, and it's cool. They can always assist with more things than you think. If there's a problem in the air, especially an emergency, in a regular situation, don't use them. They're there, they're a person, they can read, they can talk, they can help you. You at that point are designating them with whatever you need. The biggest one that people use it for is checklists, especially in an emergency. If you're running through your flow, they can read, give them the checklist, have them read the checklist out to you line by line, so that you can focus on actually aviating and flying the airplane, and they can run through that checklist so you don't have to look down at a checklist. There's also, they can confirm, we don't have landing gear, but they can confirm, what they just said over the radio to you. Listening to your logic or lack of logic. They can look through the POH. If the checklist isn't good enough, you could pull your POH out, give that to them to read through. They can help with looking at the moving map. That's pretty easy to do. They can take your iPad, look through ForeFlight, find the frequency information that you need. It's basically giving yourself the best situation and the least amount of task saturation. You're going to get into that a lot with your instructor in flying, is being task saturated. And if someone else is in the plane with you, even if they don't know how to fly, they can help you with task saturation. So you're not feeling overwhelmed with everything you have to run through. Emergency is like the worst case scenario where you would need their help, but even just regular flying, they can help you, take some things off of your plate, help you out so you can focus on flying the airplane, and they can look on your iPad, they can read through the POH. Also, smell a strange smell or a sound, it says. So just good to think about what resources you have in the plane at all times. External resources, ATC, VORs, NDBs, ILS are all nav facilities, specifically ground-based nav facilities to use to help you get back to an airport or fly direct to a VOR. And then other pilots on a common traffic advisory frequency, right? So the biggest one is ATC, or if there's a controlled airspace, they are always your first, if not your best resource, especially if you have no one else in the plane with you. Ask them for help every single time. If you do not know where you're going, if you need help figuring out the traffic pattern altitude and you just can't look at your iPad or figure it out, literally just ask them. They are people, we've talked about this before. You can ask, you can talk to them normally too. Like, I know we try to keep the frequencies clear by not, over explaining what you're doing, and we want to keep like clear, concise comms on the radio for professionalism and training, and not keeping up the frequency, but because they're also people, if there's something that you need help with, just ask in a regular sentence. You don't have to think about how to phrase it correctly, just say, you know, whatever, Torrance Tower or wherever you are, maybe you're down in Palomar Tower. I don't know where I am. Can you help me on, you know, where I should be turning? Can you give me a heading to get to the airport? Or, you know, I don't know what the traffic pattern altitude is. Can you advise what the traffic pattern altitude is? Whatever it is. Don't be scared to use them. And also, other people are listening on at untowered airports. There are other pilots over there that will help you if you also ask a simple question that you need help with. Okay. Another one of the 5 Ps. So this is also planning. So you have PAVE is like an overarching checklist to use, and then the 5 Ps kind of is overarching on top of that, on top of the PAVE checklist. So you have plan, plane, pilot, passengers, programming. Plan is obviously what you do before you get in the plane. You're doing flight planning, weather, route, fuel, looking at all the current publications, the chart supplement, doing all the planning before you even get to the airport. Plane, we already talked about. We're talking about airworthiness of the airplane. So we're checking that we have all of the documents on. We're checking that we have all of the inspections. We're also checking that we have all of the required equipment, right? We talked about required equipment. During VFR day flying, where are we looking for the required equipment for sling specifically? Yes.
KOA.
KOEL. Exactly. And then 91205 is a tomato flames, right? That's the FAA's regulation on required equipment for VFR day flying. We don't as light sport aircraft adhere to that specific checklist during the day. We follow that at night and during instrument flying, but KOEL is going to be where we look for required equipment for daytime flying. And then pilot, we already talked about. I'm safe checklist, check yourself. Passengers, yeah, we already talked about this with external pressures. Passengers have their own priorities. They try to influence you to go, let's go sooner, let's get there faster, I need to be there on time, like, don't worry about it, whatever. They have connections, they have business meetings. This is more when you're doing like, you know, this can be your friends and your family too, but this is more like when you're commercial and you have maybe clients that you're taking places and you have to, you know, you work for them, but you have to tell them no sometimes if it's unsafe. And it can be hard to tell someone that's paying you to fly no, they probably don't like that. So done in a healthy way, it can be positive. And then programming is just doing everything in the plane to set yourself up before the flight. So that's setting up your flight plan in the GPS. You put the whole flight plan in on the GPS before you get in the air. You're not inputting that as you're flying to the next point. You're setting up everything. You're using autopilot to reduce your workload, increase your situational awareness so you can look outside and you're not focused on just holding that heading for 2 hours going down the coast. I'm a big proponent of using autopilot in the plane at a certain point. Like obviously in the beginning, you all are not going to be using autopilot to fly your steep turns or whatever, but as you start doing cross countries, it's important to ask your instructor to teach you how to work the autopilot so that you can take a task off your hands. If you need to look down at your iPad and find out what the frequency, the next one you're looking for, or look at an updated weather, or do whatever, that you are able to look down and not have to worry about, you know, the plane veering off course and now you're in the path of some other plane. So it's very helpful at a certain point. You'll get there in your training. Right now, it's not helpful, but yeah, setting yourself up in programming. We have all of these avionics, these advanced avionics in the plane. Use them to your advantage. Oh man, and then we have the decide model. It's never ending. we're always assessing and mitigating risks. So the decide model is exactly down here what it says: decide, detect, estimate, course of action, identify solutions, do necessary action, and evaluate. This is once you've identified, this is like the risk assessment that you're doing for any hazard. So you're first detecting the hazard, you're estimating the amount of risk it's contributing to your flight. You're coming up with a course of action to mitigate this risk or hazard. You're identifying solutions to the hazard, and you're doing necessary action and evaluating afterward the risk again. This is pretty simple. You might be asked this a couple times on just openly. They'll ask you, how do you plan? I mean, they'll start with, once you get into cross-country planning, they'll start with, how did you start flight planning? Or what was your first action to flight plan? Or how did you plan this flight today? Whatever it is. And they're expecting you to start at one of these models that we've talked about, the PAVE, the 5Ps, the DECIDE model. They're expecting you to start there when you talk about flight planning and let them know that you're incorporating that into what you're doing on the ground before you get in the air. So know these generally. You don't have to memorize all of these, but know all the models are there for you to talk about to an instructor or a DP or whoever you're doing your checklist. Know that they're there, that you're going to have to talk about what actions you took on the ground to mitigate risk. So you'll have to say, oh, I started with the PAVE checklist. I went through the pilot, the aircraft, the environment, and the external pressures, and you'll go through all that. Or I use the 5P method and then go through all that on how you evaluated the risk, okay? And then if they talk about the DECIDE model, they're talking about you've identified a hazard, you've identified something in the air or a hazard before you fly, and this is like the systematic approach to assessing the hazard, assessing the risk with the hazard, and identifying solutions. Okay. Keep going. Okay, quiz. We're gonna go back a little bit. I want to go back to pattern really quick before we take the quiz. I'm assuming we don't, but do we have any questions about aeronautical decision making? ADM. You're gonna hear ADM a lot. You're gonna be expected to have good ADM, especially if you start doing solo flights and solo cross-country flights and something goes wrong and you have to talk to. There have been a couple times where people take the plane solo and they made a bad decision in the air or whatever, and they come back and then management or your instructor or all of them sit you down and talk to you about, okay, what was your thought process, what happened, and you have to explain your ADM. You have to explain your aeronautical decision making and what led you to whatever occurred. And if you can you can show them that you had and back up with some kind of plan that you had, or you assess the risk and whatever, that's always going to help you. But you shouldn't be getting into any situation like that if you've done your due diligence before the flight and mitigated all the risks that you can. That's the overall that we're looking at. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, okay. We're good then. I'll do that before we go to the quiz. And then back to pattern, there's a couple things that the slides missed out on that I want to see, make sure that we know and make sure that we're covering. So, okay. Like the other day, I'm going to go through this quiz. Just say out loud what you think the answer is so we can go through a couple of these and talk about if we're not understanding parts specifically with the traffic pattern here. So the numbers 4 and 22 on the approach ends of the runway indicate that the runway is oriented approximately 004 degrees and 22 true, 040 and 220 true, 040 and 220 magnetic.
Bar.
See? Good job, guys. Magnetic is the course. Okay. Seems like we understand that the wind is shown by the landing direction indicator. So this is different than what we talked about the windsock. This is one of those triangle indicators for the wind, the pilot should land on what runway if this is indicating the wind down here?
That's a tailwind. Alright.
What are we thinking?
9.
9. Runway 9 and expect a crosswind from the right? No, guys. Yeah. Okay, so this one I want to talk about before we get into the quiz. Because we didn't look at this indicator, the windsock is different because we talked how it blows up the windsock with the wind. This indicator is pointing to where the wind is coming from.
Oh,
So the wind is coming from over here, which means it's blowing this way from the northwest, whatever that is, the northwest. See that? So it's pointing this, I think it's called a trihedron, whatever it is. This triangle indicator is pointing, the top is pointing to where the wind's coming from. So it's not blowing from here, like the windsock, it's pointing over here. So the wind's coming from this way, which means we need to be, which actually means the best runway is 3-1. But you see that big X, which we were supposed to notice? The runway is closed. So the next best runway is 27. So we're taking off into the wind that's coming this way. And we're gonna have a crosswind from the right because the wind's coming from here. And if we're taking off 27, that wind's gonna be a crosswind from the right. Make sense to everyone? Okay. Also, when we talk about a segmented circle over the runway, it's gonna have a wind indicator in the middle, a segmented circle that looks like this, and it has these little legs that come off of it. Do we know what these little legs are?
the runways.
Come off it. The runways? It's a traffic pattern, exactly. This is showing us the traffic pattern from the air. So what you can do also, Torrance has one. We have a segmented circle with the windsock and it has these little legs on the side you can see from the air. So if you get to an unfamiliar airport, especially an untowered, you can overfly the runway and look down and look at the segmented circle for the wind and for what the traffic pattern for each runway. So this correlates to each runway, right? Right? So this leg is this runway, and these two legs are this runway crossing, and then you follow it based on the legs, right? So you fly this way and you do right pattern off 27. Do we see that? You basically close the rectangle to where the little ends are. So if you close the rectangle over here, what pattern is 3-1?
That pattern.
Left pattern, right? Because if you close the rectangle, you'll be making left turns around the runway like this. Does this make sense? Okay, this is called a segmented circle. This is a wind indicator that's pointing its arrow towards where the wind is coming from. And then these show traffic pattern direction, left or right. And you can overfly the runway and look down and figure out the traffic pattern without looking up, say your iPad dies and you've lost your avionics in the plane and you can't look at your map and you can't look on your iPad for what the pattern is for the chart supplement. You should have done that in the air before you got there. But say you have to divert and you can overfly the runway. If we want to overfly the runway, what altitude do we want to be at?
500 feet above TV.
Exactly. We don't want to overfly the runway at traffic pattern altitude. We're obviously going in a collision course with other planes that are in the pattern. So the standard is to fly 500 above traffic pattern altitude. It's the same. Has anyone been asked when they come back into Torrance to fly midfield and join left pattern for 29er left? Anyone? Not yet? Okay, that's a thing that can happen, especially when you're coming from Compton. Once you start doing landings, if you go to Compton, I would just stay at Torrance to do landings. But if you go to Compton and you're coming back from Compton from the north down to Compton, they might tell you to cross midfield over the runways, and then basically at the PV hills, you'll come do a left pattern back to the smaller runway. Does that make sense? But they're gonna ask you to fly midfield to get across the other side of the runway so you can do pattern and not encroach on the people doing pattern for the big runway to and right. So when they ask you to fly midfield over the runway, to get into 29er left, you're going to fly at what altitude? Our pattern's 1,100. Yeah, Jake. 16, there you go. We're at 1,100 for our pattern, right? So 500 plus that, you're gonna be at 1,600. It's the same for right 270s, right? Who's done a right 270 departure? Okay, a lot of people. Do you recognize what altitude you're at when you cross over midfield? Yeah. You'll probably be at 15 right when you start the crossing, and then you need to be crossing over top at around 1,600 because that's 500 feet above traffic pattern altitude. So when you do it by yourself, you want to recognize when you turn to that downwind, make sure you have enough altitude before you make that cross over the runway. Make sure you're at 1.5 turning to 1.6 on your altitude. Okay, just wanted to make sure. I was pretty sure that we weren't understanding this, so I'm glad we went to the quiz. Next one, the recommended entry position for traffic pattern is which one? 45 to the base leg, just below traffic pattern, along straight in final approach to the runway. 45 at the midpoint of the down, exactly. Even shows in the picture, but good. 45 degrees to the midpoint of the runway, entering the downwind, and then you'll turn base and final. So everybody in the pattern can see you entering, right? Okay, back to this. Segment and circle indicates that landing on runway 26 will be with a... Wait, first we have to figure out where 26 would be, and then where the wind is coming from.
Okay.
Someone said A. We agreeing with A?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tailwind.
A?
It's ready. Okay. Go, go.
So she's like, no.
Oh, yeah, it's B.
Oh, so you're already-
It's gotta be.
Right, okay.
They're all wrong. Oh, wait, yeah, no, that's not making sense. Because you're landing this way. Runway 26. It's a left quartering, like, kind of tailwind. Doesn't make no sense.
It's in there.
Okay, let's make a decision and then we'll talk about the answer. Okay, I'm hearing C.
Yeah.
Are we good with C?
Yeah.
Okay, 2-6. Where, okay, this is north. So you all are thinking 2-7, right, for west? 2-7's over here. So where are we taking off if the runway's 2-7? We're over here, right? Do you understand so the runway numbers are pointing in the direction that you're taking off. So when you're on the runway, faced on center line, you are pointed on the magnetic heading where you're facing. So if we start on the runway here, we are pointed towards 2-7 over here, right? We're looking confused. Are we understanding this? The runway numbers, when you're lined up, are pointing you, like when we're lined up on 29er right, we are pointing in the direction of 290. We're a little bit off, it's more 296. But when we set our heading bug at 296 or 290, if you want to be on the runway, that means we're facing 29er, right? In this case, we're facing 270. We're facing to the west. The wind is coming from the west towards us, right? We're facing towards the west. So if we sit our plane here, the runway 27 is going to be here. In this case, they say 26, but basically the same thing. 27 will be here. The number 27 will be here. You'll get on the runway, and then you'll take off into following the heading of 27 towards over here's west 27, right? That's the first thing we need to understand. And then once you realize that, then you see the windsock is blowing up the sock from over here. And that means that if you take off here, there's a right quartering headwind. It's basically, it's not quite a crosswind over here. It's kind of in the middle of a headwind and a crosswind. That means a quartering headwind over here.
Says it.
It says what?
Oh, no, just like.
Okay. Is it clicking for everyone else? When we are on a runway, the numbers are the heading we are facing lined up on the runway. So over here will be 27 because we are facing 270. Over here will be 090, niner, because we're facing over here where niner is, right? Some of us are looking, they're squinting their eyes, they're confused. What runway is this? If we're sitting on,
Write it on the board, I would know.
okay, use the cardinal directions on this. This is 27. This is 090. If we're sitting on the runway here, if we're sitting facing on the runway, what heading are we facing towards? 18. So this is runway 18. This is runway 36, because we are facing north. You understand now? Yes. A little bit. It's the same thing, like think about this as, our runway, 29er. If you look on, a heading indicator, we are facing on the runway 29er. That means we're taking off runway 29. It doesn't mean that we start, I'm not even gonna complicate it anymore. This is it. This is it. So when it says runway 26, we're basically over here a little bit. I mean, it could have said 27 and made it easier, but we're basically over here on a runway. And then the wind's coming from the northwest, blowing this way, quartering headwind from our right side, because our plane is sitting here. That's our plane. It should have been the other way, that way. Big wing, little horizontal. This is our plane. We're facing 270 on the heading indicator on the compass. 270 is over here. 360, if we think about our heading indicators over here. 090, 18. So the runway that we're on is the magnetic heading that we are facing when we're lined up on the runway. Hopefully we're good on this. I've said it 10 times again. Tell me if I need to explain it a different way, but this is how we figure out our runway numbers, and then the wind is coming from over here. Okay, good stuff. Obviously we needed to clear some things up on this. Okay. Oh man. Next, which approach and landing objective is assured when the pilot remains on the proper glide path of the VASIs? The VASIs are these two lights on top of each other to the left of the runway, right? So what is guaranteed when you stay on glide path, when you stay on the red over white? Safe obstruction clearance in the approach area, lateral course guidance to the runway, runway identification, and course guidance.
Landed.
Lots.
Okay,
That's all that's
this is getting, again, past what was in the slide, so I don't blame anybody for not understanding this, but okay, let's think about what is the proper glide path? Do we know the angle? 3 degrees, right? And an angle of 3 degrees is what kind of guidance? What guidance is it giving us if it keeps us on 3 degrees?
Lateral.
Is it lateral? Lateral is this way, right? Coming out this way and brings us in like a funnel this way. Vertical guidance brings us in like this way, right? This is vertical guidance down to the runway. Lateral would be, wait, here I go with the pen again. This would be lateral guidance. This gets into instrument, but lateral guidance keeps us basically center line, right? keeps us right in the middle of the runway. If this is the runway, a glide path of 3 degrees takes us down vertically, right? This is vertical guidance. Okay, so if we know that the VASIs are providing vertical guidance to the runway 3 degrees, we know this one is not right because we're not getting lateral guidance. Now we have to choose vertical guidance isn't an option. So now we need to choose what is the vertical guidance there for? Why is it giving us an indication of if you stay on this path, you're good? Okay, I like what's the thought there, because if this is telling us that we're on 3 degrees here, is it in any way indicating what runway we're going to? It's just 2 lights. Are the 2 lights telling us what runway we're identifying? No, it can't identify the runway with 2 lights, right? So it's giving us safe obstruction clearance in the approach area. Again, this isn't in the slides, but this is something, these are like adding on to the concepts that we learned, right? This is like, one step above thinking, okay, the guidance that it's giving us, it knows that if we keep on this and we don't get too low, we are clearing obstacles in the approach area. It is keeping us on a vertical path from the air to the runway, and that clears us of obstructions in the area. The obstruction clearance that VASIS gives is plus or minus 10 degrees of the extended runway center line and 4 nautical miles to the threshold. You don't need to know those numbers, but it was more of like a, what's the term? Like a getting rid of all the other ones, eliminating the others because those are wrong. So it must be giving us obstacle clearance because we're getting that vertical descent. So we're clearing obstacles like trees or whatever that's right here, and we're following that path to the runway. Because there are some runways where there's things right before. It's even if you go 29 or left, there's a bunch of buildings right here, right? You clear a bunch of buildings before you actually get to the runway. If you're too low, you're not on the glide path, you could be in danger of the obstacles that are right in front of that runway. Right? Not lateral. Lateral goes this way, vertical goes this way. And then the lights aren't giving us runway identification. The numbers are giving us runway identification. Okay? Keep going. How can a military airport be identified at night? We're going back to those lights. Alternate white and green light flashes. This is again testing how well you actually understood, but dual 2 quick white flashes and a green flash, white flashing lights and a steady green.
Beamed. White.
Okay, good. I thought this would be hard because I thought we'd remember it was white and green, but then it gives us all these other options. It's 2 white flashes, 1 long green flash. Okay, good. That's really like when I talked about in the slides, that's the most important one we need to know. For military airports, we're not really going to see seaplane airports. Those have a yellow and white light, but we need to have in our head the military is 2 white, 1 green flash. Okay, to set the pilot controlled runway lights on medium intensity, the pilot should click the microphone 1 time within 4 seconds, 5 times within 5 seconds, 3 times within 3 seconds. B? Good. B, because it goes light, medium, high intensity, so 3, 5, 7. And it's all within the same amount of seconds. So it's 3 within 3 seconds, 5 within 5 seconds, 7 within 7 seconds. So if you're doing the high intensity lights, you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 within 7 seconds. Okay, this we didn't ever talk about at night. We haven't talked about illusions or anything, but just from what we can infer, approaches to land at night should be accomplished with a steeper descent at a higher airspeed or the same during daytime. See? Good. Good. Just kind of common sense on that one. Also, these are probably the worst thing you could do at night is a steeper descent and a higher airspeed. So same as the daytime, we just have less visibility, more lights. Okay, okay, we haven't talked about this either, but it's a good, you know, I don't know why it wasn't in the slides, but do people know what a lasso clearance is? Lasso? Land and hold short operations is what LASSO stands for. So at airports like Long Beach, like we talked about, the long 30 runway intersects at the end with 26 right. And intersecting runways, like in this picture, have hold short lines on the runways that they want you to stop, and then they'll have landing traffic. You'll stop on the runway and they'll have landing traffic land on the opposite, intersecting runway in front of you. So yeah, scary, right? Ugh, like, don't want to do that. The whole land and hold short operations are pilot determined. You are allowed to accept or deny. ATC is allowed to ask you, can you do this? And you are allowed to decide whether you can or cannot do that based off landing distance available. Hopefully you did calculations before you went to the airport based on pilot abilities, I guess. Do you feel confident enough to make sure that you're stopped before you get to the hold short line? But the biggest, that's part of the question here, but the biggest thing that we need to know as student pilots is you are not allowed to accept a land and hold short operation clearance. So if they say, if you're over at Long Beach and they ask you to land and hold short, you need to say unable student pilot, and that's it. And then you keep landing regular and they'll move traffic. Yeah.
The length from the ratio to the hold short line, is that depicted on the chart supplement?
Yes, it should be, because the intersecting runways will have where they intersect, and then you can do exactly like you said. You'll do, okay, I have, I'll be able to land within 500 feet of my touchdown point, and then you can measure, okay, I have 500 feet from the threshold. That gives me 200 feet maybe before the next runway. Is that enough to fully brake before we cross the other runway? But yes, that'll be on the chart supplement. Yeah, the biggest thing, this is not part of the question, but since we're talking about land and hold short operations, you need to know as a student pilot, you are not allowed to accept clearances. So you will say unable student pilot, or your instructor will say unable student pilot. But if you're solo, you'll say unable, and they will move on. They'll have to move whatever traffic they were trying to plan to cross runways. They'll have to figure it out. It's not your problem. You continue to land regularly. So we talk about who has final authority to accept or decline a lasso clearance. Pilot in command, second in command, air traffic controller. Yeah. They can ask for it, but they cannot make you do a land and hold short operation. Okay, last one, I think. Yep. VASI lights shown in the picture indicate that the airplane is above the glide slope. 2 whites is too high and 2 reds is too low. Okay, good. I think this clarified some things that we needed to make sure we know before the quiz. Oh, I'm gonna put this up. Yeah.
You know what I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
right?
Yep.
Okay, was it into like eating slash extreme?
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
Mhm. It's a trick question by Andrew. It's meant to mix you up on the different ones. You had it right though.
That the EGT one.
That was not the EGT one. That was the I'm safe checklist one. Raise your hand. Yeah, a couple people, keep going.
So there's no. Yeah. That's it. That's it.
I guess people's spots are based in my state. Thank you. You. Oh. Cause in like the Haas racing headquarters in UK. Then. Haas monthly. Distant from this. They don't, but they can remember. Yeah. I think that's the guy who drives around. I didn't do like that. They have.
It's all free.
The process. Steve. Yeah, no, it's like you have to do one. Dark.
No, no, it's.
Oh. Function.
Yeah.
Try to get, what? Try to get, that. Do that. If you get. I don't think.
What did you get?
What when you. You go to one sleep.
You get.
Where's he? I speak really damn it. Where's that? So we have, and you said he's going to try to take him.
That's hilarious.
Like a few flights. We go through them, so.
Okay. Everyone back. I'll just stop off. Okay, guys, this looks good. I don't know who some of these people are that are taking the quiz. I don't recognize the names, but pretty much everyone passed. Rob? Yay, yeah, top three someone's. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Who are these extra people?
It's good.
Oh, and because we weren't here Friday last time, I'll say it again, the quizzes do not matter for anything, they're just a way for you to tell what you know, what you don't know, so. I haven't looked specifically at people yet, but if you didn't do well in the quiz, don't worry about it. This has nothing to do with the actual program. We just want to see where we are as a class and what I need to teach better. Stop it for a row. I don't know if I'm really.
But your last pictures of yourself.
No, you're not just asked it, see, it shows on here. Front rows always got the hundreds. Shows on.
How many students got?
Okay, is everyone for sure done? I'm not seeing some people's names on here. We doing the quiz with different people's names? That's a for real question. I mean, we don't do this. It doesn't go back to like your record, but are some people taking the quiz as other people's names? Okay. I have no way of finding you, but there's some weird names in here that are not in the class.
Is it?
Yeah, no, so who's taking the quiz is Otto, because I know he's not here.
Funny.
No, they're just random or like only initials. They won't put their. Someone took it as a blank, no name, just a dot, just a period. Okay. Let's count the hundreds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hundreds, guys. That's crazy. Yeah, and pretty like I don't know what the percentage is, but pretty much all of you passed, which is really great to see. So let me turn the TV back on. We'll go over each question. Where the hell is my remote?
Incline. And fighting, is that not the remote?
Oh, it was back. I saw this one. I was like, that's not the remote. Okay. Will an aircraft with a forward CG be more or less fuel efficient? Less fuel efficient. 84 is pretty good. I'm glad 0 on the CG doesn't affect fuel efficiency. More fuel efficient, yeah. Does anyone that got it right want to explain to the couple people why it's less fuel efficient? Go ahead.
So if it's forward center of gravity, then it's pitched up, so to keep it level, it's gonna take more fuel to keep it like that. And therefore be less efficient because fuel is gonna use them.
Nice. All right, less fuel efficient, right? We went over weight and balance. This one, oh, I thought we would get 100 on this, guys. But there's some weird names. I don't know if these people are in the class. But what is this?
Displaced threshold.
Displaced threshold, right? These 3 separate arrows pointing, these little arrows pointing to the threshold. These are the threshold bars, the piano keys. So this is the displaced threshold. And we can take off and taxi only on this point. We cannot land here. We have to land at the threshold or beyond on the runway, right? Yeah. Take off and land, a little concerning. Take off, taxi, and land, little concerning. Taxi only, I'll give it to you. Take off, maybe you forgot, but landing, bad. Cannot land here. Have to land after. So this is the threshold, land on the threshold or beyond. And we can see how our taxi line comes here. We hold short right here at the runway. You can taxi onto the displaced threshold, and we can stop here and start our takeoff from all the way back here to have all available runway distance, but we cannot land. Okay, who has the right of way between a glider and a sling? Wow, 100%, love it. The glider, since it's slower and less maneuverable, yay. Okay, this one was a little tricky because This is at a giant airport that has multiple alpha taxiways. So this is taxiway Alpha 19. It's confusing because most of the time we just see an A here. We wouldn't see a number. Numbers are usually the runways. Taxiways are usually the alphabet. So this is taxiway A19, black square, we're there. So we're on taxiway Alpha 19 and we're approaching regular alpha. So this is the directional sign with the arrows. That means we're coming up to, we're approaching alpha, but we're on A19. Good job, most of you. I understand the confusion with the numbers on there, but do you have a higher or lower stall speed with AFCG? Lower, right? CG doesn't affect stall speed. Dang, but higher, I understand. Does anyone want to explain why it's lower? Anyone? Yeah, Molly, go ahead.
Because there's, it's, the nose is pointing up, so to counteract, to get down,
Mm-hmm.
means there's a distance. So.
Exactly.
So it takes longer.
Yes, taking longer means there's more time for drag to act on the airplane as it gets to that critical angle of attack that's farther away now because we pushed the nose down to keep our nose at a lower angle of attack for AFCG. That time that drag has to act on the plane, drag is slowing the airplane down to a lower speed. So when we reach the critical angle of attack, we are at a lower airspeed than we would be if we were with a forward CG or a centered CG, right? So that time that drag has, extra time that drag has to act on the airplane is slowing the plane down, which means by the time we reach the critical angle of attack, we are at a lower airspeed. Do we understand? 75% isn't bad. It's a difficult concept, but most of you got it. Can you land at an airport with a rotating beacon showing 2 white and 1 green light? 97, I like that. Also, no was a better answer than yes. No, unless it's an emergency. So you can always land at any airport, doesn't matter what airport it is. A runway is a runway. You can land anywhere in an emergency. Which direction of turn is standard? Dang. I was hoping for 100 on this. Which direction of turn is standard traffic pattern? Left turns, right? Left turn standard. We do right turns at Torrance. That means it's non-standard. There's no standard. Not correct. Whichever keeps the plane away from terrain. That's an interesting answer, but it's left turns. Okay. If a large jet lands before you, when do you want to touch down on the runway? 81's pretty good after the touchdown point, right? Because the large jet is creating wake turbulence from the wingtip vortices, which fall off the end of the plane on the wingtips. They move outward on the wings and they fall behind the plane. So when they are landing before you, if you land above, like beyond their touchdown point, after their touchdown point, all of their wingtip vortices are behind you and you are over here. Yes.
Does this matter as much if you're like also in a large jet?
Probably not, because they will have spaced you enough so you're not landing like directly behind them. So there should be enough time between that a large jet wouldn't be affected by a little bit. They've dissipated a little bit by the time you're landing, but for a small plane, you don't even want to take the chance of anything messing up your landing. But large jets after each other, don't really have to worry about that. What are 4 steps to recover from a spin? 91 is really good. I would have liked 100. But again, 29 responses, there's not 29 of you in here. So how's that work? I don't know. I'm gonna assume that all of you in here got it. Power idle, ailerons neutral, rudder opposite of turn, elevator down to break the stall. Hair, right? Do you have more or less control over the plane's pitch with AFCG? 72 is pretty good. 20, well, honestly, 23 of you. I don't know how this is so many people taking the quiz when there's only 22 of you in here, but I'm gonna assume this is all of you in here. Less because the arm is shorter, right? So we talked about the arm is the distance. When we're measuring between, we're talking about CG, so we're measuring from the center of gravity to the elevator to determine stability. So when we measure from CG to the elevator, an aft CG means it's further, it's closer to the elevator, which means a shorter arm, right? So the arm is shorter, and a shorter arm means less control, less authority over the elevator. Because we think of that lever, a longer lever, you have more authority, a shorter lever, it's harder. You can think about hinges on a door. That's why we space the handle of the door from the hinges of the door farther apart so that you're able to get leverage on the door. Shorter arm means less authority, less control over the plane's pitch. That's pretty good. Can you land at a private airport? 97 is good. No, unless you contact the owner or have an emergency. Pretty straightforward. Without the use of an iPad or an AFD, which is also the chart supplement, can you determine an airport traffic pattern direction of turns? We just went over this in the little quiz that I made you take. So you fly midfield and you look for the windsock and the pattern indicator. 91, I like that. 29 of you. How did 29 of you take the quiz? If a large jet takes off before you, how do you avoid wake turbulence? So it's basically the opposite, the question that it talks about for landing. So 75% is good, 24 of you. You take off before its rotation point, because as soon as it starts creating lift, it's creating wingtip vortices, creating wake turbulence. So as soon as it takes off, those are created. So if you take off before it takes off, you are not in the path of its wake turbulence. Got it?
What matches rate of ascent? I feel like I think the
We are able to climb at a steeper angle in the small plane than a jet is. They're kind of, flying like this up, and we can take this. And if you want to, if you're worried about it, you're following along the same path, you could turn crosswind and depart away from them if they're going straight out, or choose a different direction. Or if you are both going to turn crosswind, you can ask for ATC to give you an early crosswind to get out of their path if you're worried about that. But you should be at a different angle, and they should be way past your point by the time you reach it, right? They're going to be way fast enough. So a lot of the times when you're taking off, you're not following, they're following some instrument procedure for departure. But if you're worried about it and you're flying right behind them, and you're worried you're going to get into their wake turbulence, you just ask ATC for a heading that gets you away, or an early crosswind if you can stay in the pattern. This one good, 91. Where should you enter the turn for turns around a point? The downwind. I think I said that 20 times on that class. So good. How do we calculate our moment for weight and balance? Weight times arm. Good, 91. 29 of you. That's good. When do you run the highest risk of entering a flat spin? Okay, I talked about this briefly. It looks like most people got it when we talked about loading the CG aft outside of the allowable envelope. That's when you can run the risk of entering a flat spin. Good. What is the V&E speed? 135. Would have liked 100 on this. I don't know who these extra people are, but they're ruining our percentages because I like seeing 100. What's the sling's max service ceiling? 12,000 MSL. They're trying to trick you here with the AGL MSL options, but 12,000 MSL, mean sea level, means above, this is above ground level. Not. Which of the following is not part of the I'm safe checklist? This is the one that I was talking about that had a little bit of a trick question. It's external pressures, good. Most people got this. They're trying to trick you with external pressures as part of the PAVE checklist, the PAVE checklist. And then you have the I'm safe checklist is specifically for the pilot, and the E in the I'm safe is emotions and eating. So good job on that. This one's kind of hard too, because we barely even touched on EGT specifically, but this is exhaust gas temperatures. If your EGT sensor number 4, that's very specific, spikes, then stops working and your lane light A comes on, what should you do? The biggest part of this is your lane light A comes on. It's not really about the sensor. I talked a little bit about how a lot of the times the sensors are the problems with the lane lights, but your lane light A comes on. It doesn't say anything about lane B coming on. You just have one lane light. So you cycle lane A, and then if the light still stays on, you can return to the airport. Yes.
So you can cycle it if it. So.
Yes, as long as it's one. Flashing or solid, you can recycle it after you take a picture of what the problem is. Flashing or solid, just one lane light, you can recycle
One
it.
of them's off.
Yes, as long as the other light is off. If one is flashing and one is solid, don't touch either of them. If both are solid, definitely don't touch either of them. But if one lane light is off and the other one is either flashing or completely illuminated, solid, you can, one, take a picture of what the error is. It's usually going to be exactly what he says here, an EGT sensor. And then once you take the picture, you can cycle it, meaning turn it off, wait a few seconds, turn it back on, and then hopefully the lane light will be gone. You can continue flight at that point if the lane light turns off. If it comes back on after you cycle it, best practice is to return to the airport and give it to maintenance. You shouldn't have, it's not an emergency then, just return to the airport, keep monitoring all your other instruments in the engine page. But return to the airport if it stays on after you cycle it. What can happen if you skid too much turning base to final? You run the risk of entering a spin. Also, possibly dead. Like you said. Okay, 97, I think we understand that. So we have, keep going. Huge picture, but can you cross the dashed line left to right without permission? So can you cross from here over to here without permission? Yes. No, you must hold short of this marking regardless of the side you approach. So no, you do not have to hold short on the dash side. You hold short on the double solid line side. So this side, you have to stop before you cross. The dash lines means you're free to pass through. You'll see this the most when you're coming off the runway, you're clearing the runway, and you'll come to a hold short line and you'll stop because you're like, oh shoot, can I cross it? If the dash line is on your side, you can cross to the other side. That's how you clear the runway as well. You are clearing the runway once you're past the hold short line. They want you to move past this and then stop on this side to contact ground, okay? Good. Really good on the quiz. Do we have any remaining questions on what we talked about today or quiz questions or what we're doing? Anything?
What
Anything?
does stand?
Exhaust gas temperatures. Yeah, those EGT sensors, you can feel them if you put your hand in the little nostrils of the plane. They're up at the front. Yeah, they're connected. Giving sensor, they're one of the sensors giving information to the ECU, and because they get the exhaust gas on them and get so hot, a lot of the times they fail. They're very sensitive. Also, all the sensors are very sensitive, which is why when we're talking about lane lights and there's an issue with the sensor, it doesn't mean that you're going to land on a field or that it's an emergency. It's just a bad sensor that they have to replace, but a bad sensor you don't want to fly with. So you just go to your nearest airport, try to get back to Torrance if you can, and get it back to maintenance. So, any other questions? Next week isn't weather. Dang, week 4 is weather. Next week is airspace and charts and regulation. Ooh, this is gonna be a lot. Yeah. Take a look, since we have a long weekend, do me a favor and please look over generally airspace, generally chart symbology. I'm gonna have to go over it again, but it works so much better if you're already familiar. And then you come in here and we just like review and like really solidify what we're talking about. It doesn't help when you have no idea what I'm talking about in the beginning. You just stare at me and you have no idea what I'm talking about. So please, if you have a spare 30 minutes, look at this before Tuesday. And remember, don't come here Monday. No one will be here. Come here Tuesday. We will start. Then we'll begin. Bye. Bye.